the consumer goods sector is a vital one because that's where people spend money in order to consume goods. Did I say the same thing twice? Economic turbulence, a tough nut to crack. Here's a new report from Afrinvest, which has this in-depth consumer goods sector update report. Now, we're going to get into this with Nathanael Disu. He's a research analyst at Afrinvest West Africa. Nathanael, good morning to you, and I think Happy New Year.
Yeah, Happy New Year.
Haven't seen you in a while. Yeah. All right, so we've got a number of charts. This is what, a 50-page report, very in-depth, great stuff. Let me start with the, I think, food and beverage as a percentage of GDP, and then its real growth, because there seems to be a bit of a divergence between the two. So what essentially, we should put that chart up any moment now. What essentially is that chart telling us?
Okay, so that chart just gives an insight into the contribution of the food and beverage, because that's like the proxy. That's like the proxy for the consumer goods sector on the GDP. And if you look at the chart, it shows that there's a kind of upward movement in 2023. And that's because despite the fact that there was removal of PMS subsidy and other macroeconomic challenges, we could see that consumer good businesses still were able to pass on the cost of their goods to the cost for the customers, and that's why we could see that their revenue were also going up, because consumer goods companies have never struggled with revenue over time. So despite the economic situation, they're able to churn out great revenue numbers. And in 2023 alone, there were about 4.6 trillion naira in the entire consumer goods players. But we could see that where the pressure lies most is their cost of goods and also their finance costs, because that's where the entire the danger is in the consumer goods sector.
I almost thought you were going to say that's where they enter one trouser. I almost thought you were going to say, I don't know why, but yeah, well, that's what the trouble is.
Yes.
Okay, so that chart, that's one is the cost, the businesses on the one side, but then we've got the households and the consumers. You've got another chart, and this thing just shows, I mean, look at the nosedive in household contributions for our viewers. That is the green line, and then you've got GDP growth in gray, the gray bars. So explain that. I mean, consumers, they just bash them over the head.
Yeah, so if you look at from 2019, you could see that there was slight decline. 2020, COVID happened, everybody know. But in 2021, there was a kind of recovery. That's why you could see that spike up.
Yeah.
But in 2022, 2023, that's when reality now dawned on everyone. So the household consumer spending power has been declining over time. The amounts that you used to buy rice last year is not the same as this year.
Yeah.
Every household items that you spend money on, the cost has, and also salaries are not increasing. There's no much income, that's so to say, for the consumer. So that's why you are seeing that spike down in household contribution. You know,
I want to. It's just this show takes up so much of my time. There should be a study with the number of children in a household versus the spending, because I think there's a correlation there in terms of output because of the size of the household. Third chart, profitability. And this kind of is similar to the first one, because I think it's incredibly interesting. I think this was my favorite chart here. So we've got revenue in gray, cost of sales in green, your EBITDA, which is earnings before interest, tax, depreciation, amortization, in what is that, aqua blue, and then profit after tax in orange. So let's sit here for a while. This is, I mean, I think 2023 is incredible, right? Because that's when the fuel subsidies are removed, as you said, and exchange rate liberalization. So, what is this chart telling us?
So this chart is just showing like is more like two different stories.
Yeah.
The revenue and the cost of goods sold and the costs are almost at the same par. Yeah. But when you now look at the EBITDA and the profit after tax, that's where the challenge comes in. So you could see that the profitability of most industry players was watered down due to majorly high FX and less, because most of these companies take on loans and the like. So by the time they have to convert that into naira, it kind of just erodes shareholders' value. So despite the fact that they are making more money, they are not able to retain majority of that. So only few players are able to kind of still have positive bottom line figures, but most of them are always showing out negative figures.
See, this is why I love bringing you guys on. All the asset managers in Nigeria, you guys are fantastic, right? Yeah. Because there's, can we put the chart back up? Government agencies are always talking about the amount of revenue that they make. Yeah. But then I'm not going to make you answer because I know they are not going. But if we were to make these charts for government agencies in Nigeria that are always talking about how we are making, this is our revenue, target revenue. What is your bottom line after you've backed out your expenses for your overheads, your costs and everything? Great chart, great chart. Let's move on to the next chart, which I think is on, this was really, I really didn't want you to explain this to us. So we've got your EBITDA margin, again, earnings before interest, tax, depreciation and amortization. And then you've got your profit after tax margin, and there's a big divergence from about 2022 going into 2023. So is this still telling the same story?
Yeah, it's kind of telling a similar story with the previous chart. So for the EBITDA margin, it's showing that from the revenue that they made, how much was the margin to the EBITDA. Yeah. But the profit after tax margin, you could see that from 2023 to half year as a trend, because it's just now that companies are releasing their full year results. So we don't have all the numbers yet. But if you look at half year, it has declined and it's likely going to be the same for full year 2024. So it's actually this year that will not give us a clear direction of what's the actual direction of the consumer goods story. Because if you look at the year-on-year figure, from 2024 to 2023, you would see that huge 3-digit percentage increase. Why? Because of the FX exchange rate stuff that was done. But for 2025 to 2024, because that's now like the new normal. Right. So we are not expecting to see that huge year-on-year gap. And also, the GDP rebasing has also happened. That would also kind of have a factor on the inflation dynamics and consumer goods. So 2025, it might not necessarily be that consumer goods sector are going to kind of boom, but it's just more like to give clear clarity, especially when Q1 numbers come in and half-year numbers come in. That will not give a clear direction that after the rebasing has been done, this is the figures that consumer goods players are now churning out. Then compare that to 2024, that's not going to say, okay, are we still clear out of the woods or there's still more trouble ahead?
More predators in the woods. Porter's analysis. I love Porter's analysis. You're taking me back to school now. You put it, which is the you did a Porter's analysis for the sector, the opportunities, barriers to entry. Yeah, this was really great. Let's see how fast we can get through this. What is your Porter's analysis? What is this on the screen telling us about the consumer goods sector?
So it's kind of giving different insights into how the consumer goods sector is playing out. So for example, looking at the bargaining power of consumers and the threat of substitutes, we know that due to the decline in household purchasing power, Nigerians are now looking for alternatives.
Substitutes?
Yes, and there are now more unregulated food products in the market. So you go to market, you see them cutting it into different sizes. So people are after affordability, and brand loyalty would be a kind of test in Nigeria now. That are people able to still stay loyal to their favorite brands, or are they going to start looking for alternative that, okay, bread is still bread. It's just for me to eat. Detergent is still detergent. It's just for me to wash my clothes. So will they still be going after brands, or will they going to like, okay, let me just focus on the price? Which one is the lower one? Because that's what you see when you go to the mall. You see a lot of persons, different brand products and everything. Like, which one is the lowest one? This one is 1,500. This one is 800. Let me just pick the 800.
Right. Regardless of the brand.
Yeah. So that's the challenges, and also the competitive rivalry would also be a major thing to focus on, because we have huge unlisted players in the consumer goods sector. Huge. So if those companies can even probably list, because there are a lot of huge players that are, because we don't really have their full numbers because they are not public, but those are kind of major players in the consumer goods sector. So that competitive rivalry would also come into play, because now companies are now moving towards, or are now improving on their B2C strategy, like feeding the customers directly instead of just B2B. So those are the dynamics that would be in play in 2025, and seeing how players are able to navigate. I
love the Porter's analysis. You can apply it to almost any sector. Almost any. So really great. Okay, your report also went into some subsectors. Sugar. What is the story with sugar? I think you had Dangote Sugar, you had Boa, and I think you have one other player in the sector. What's the story with our sugar? And first of all, we're not producing enough, right? We're still importing.
Yeah, so as a matter of fact, in that import, Nigeria is like the 9th largest importer of sugar. Yes, and we import about 1.8 million metric tons, and we consume about like 1.6 million thereabouts. And the sugar industry is kind of controlled by like 95% by these 3 major players: Dangote Sugar, Flour Mills, and Boa Foods.
Yeah.
But if you look at the players, like these 4 players, down the years, Dangote Sugar has been like the major player in the sugar industry. But in 2023, if you look at the charts, that's when Boa Foods started meeting up.
Yeah.
So Boa Foods is the one at the top, like light blue, while Dangote Sugar is the blue. But in 2024 half year, Boa Foods eclipsed Dangote Sugar, and that expectation is to play out in full year. That in 2025, Boa Foods will now be the leading player in the sugar industry, because they've released their full year 2024 results, but Dangote Sugar has not released. So, but based on what we saw in half year and 9 months, Boa Foods will now be the new king in the sugar industry.
You know, there's they're also into cements.
Virtually into similar. So more like
the big billionaires behind it, Mr. Alhaji Abdul Samad Rabiu and of course Alhaji Dangote, which are both here. It's very interesting. Consumers win, right? If there's more players in the sector. HPC, home and personal care.
Yeah.
Valentine's Day is coming up. Our young ladies, the money they are spending on the creams and the anyway, that should be another segment. But HPC, so home and personal care. I think you only highlighted 2 players here.
Yeah, those are the 2 major players. For the 2 major listed players, and if you look at it, PZ has been like the major market leader in that sector, but now PZ is planning to exit based on the information that we received late last year that they are going to exit. And also, Unilever exited the home care business.
That's right.
There's now a lot of uncertainty in the HPC market, because if PZ eventually and officially leaves, what is the fate of that entire subsector? Because we've also seen one other major player delisted from the exchange. So that challenges is having an
but then, Nathanael, doesn't that now go to your earlier point about the number of unlisted players, and that possibly they can maybe fill that role?
Exactly. So that gap is there. That gap exists because they didn't know in and out of the Nigerian market. So it's actually difficult for a new player to actually come in. That's why the threat of entrance
from
is kind
Porter's
of
analysis,
right. Capex budget is kind of high and everything. But those unlisted players, possibly if they become listed, they have huge value chain in the entire consumer goods sector. They go into foods, oil and everything. So they are so if they become listed, that could also help fill the gaps, because by the time PZ eventually leaves, and if Unilever does, there'll be no personal care.
Very quickly, most of the time, you have to talk about wheat, because we have a food crisis. We import wheat, which is all the derivatives. You've got a chart here. We're still, we're not, if we thought sugar was bad, we are really not. We're not producing as much wheat as well. So what's the situation with wheat in Nigeria?
So the situation with wheat is that Nigeria needs about 4.8 million metric tons of wheat. And if you look at the charts,
production is in orange.
Like
it is nothing.
Almost nothing. But despite the fact that it is almost nothing, there's still been a very minute, steady growth in the production, but it's not enough to feed the market. So the players will still need to rely on imports, and we can see what the high cost of raw materials and effects is impacting. So since there's a huge market and there's no much production happening, the players will still continue to import, and that will also weigh on the profitability. So that's why, like I said earlier, that it's not like players are out of the woods yet in terms of the FX situation and the high cost of goods. So that's the which kind of gives a clear picture of what is actually going on in their entire sector.
Fantastic stuff. Nathanael Disu, investment research analyst with Afrinvest West Africa. Thank you so much. Great report. Thanks for sharing it with us.